From AIT Studios in Abuja, Nigeria, this is the O&M Late Show with Obiora Ilo and Mamode Akuga.
Hello there, it's another Friday evening, and this is your O&M Late Show. I am Obiora Ilo. Good evening, Nigeria, and I have Mamode Akuga.
Thank you, Obiora, and good evening, Nigeria. Welcome to another night of discussions, another night of talk about Nigeria. So much is happening in the country, but very quickly, Obiora, let's go down to Southeast.
Ebonyi State to be precise.
State. And
Ebonyi State to be precise.
Yes, where political tension is rising. The State House of Assembly passed a motion to serve an impeachment notice on the governor of the state, Martin Elechi, over allegations of corruption and gross misconduct. May 29, it's how many days away? And they want to impeach the governor.
I don't know
what's going on in Ebonyi.
I don't know why anybody should be doing that at this time. Well, we know that the governor has had issues with his political family in Ebonyi State. Of course, it derived from the gubernatorial elections. The governor was supporting the former Minister of Education, Professor Chukwu, while the other group, led by the Secretary to Government, Anyim Pius Anyim, were supporting the incumbent deputy governor. At the end of the day, those that support the deputy governor took the party machinery, and
the governor lost out.
The governor lost out, and most of the governor's followers, ardent followers, joined the Labour Party. Okay. But the governor remained in PDP. I think it's the shadow of the governor that is in the PDP.
Well, but so bottom line, the vibes I'm getting immediately, Obiora, is that this impeachment may not necessarily be as a result of some serious crime that the governor may have committed. It's political.
I think it's political because they've taken the party machinery from him. You might be interested to know that just a few days back, they almost burnt the House of Assembly.
Well, I think it was set ablaze, really.
Yeah, I mean, people are accusing people from the governor's side accusing people from the deputy governor's side. But I'm just thinking that it's this impeachment. They should save us this impeachment. They should just save us.
Let's live in dogs lie and just
let
May 29. It's not too far away, gentlemen. In Ebonyi State, please don't.
And I don't know why
don't heat up the politics.
I don't know why the PDP should be doing all this, because these are all members of PDP. Sometimes people will wish that there was a stronger party, like the APC is strong in Ebonyi, and then they would take advantage of this
situation,
their unnecessary quarrel, and maybe
get electoral victory.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Well, the APC presidential candidate Muhammadu Buhari is pledging to stick with the historic peace accord, which he entered into with President Goodluck Jonathan as a means to forestall violence and during and after the elections. Well, it's good that he's still saying that he's going to stand by the peace accord.
He has been saying a lot these few days. He's made all the headlines between yesterday and today with his speech at Chatham House. Yes. And let's not forget that people like the governor of Ekiti State still claims that Buhari is not in London. So when this speech, when I was watching the speech yesterday and today, I was like, where is Fayose? Is he convinced now that Buhari is in London?
I think Fayose was, what Fayose was saying was that the interview that was passed off by APC as having been conducted in London, that interview itself, Fayose was saying, was conducted here in Nigeria. I think that's, and he took journalists.
Why is Fayose so obsessed with Buhari? Is it not better for him to just mind his business in Ekiti State, where he's being accused of not actually having done anything in the last many months that he took over as governor?
I think
shouldn't he concern himself with the business of Ekiti State?
He's constituting himself into an arrowhead of, you know,
anti-Buhari,
and some very strong words he said about Buhari's health, which a lot of people have said, hey, come on, this is below the belt.
This is below the belt.
You know, I mean,
as someone said, Zik will say, this one is below the belt. Well, ahead of the 2015 general elections and March 8 deadline for the collection of the permanent voters cards, PVC, a total of over 14 million PVCs are yet to be distributed. By the recent data released by INEC, a total of 54 million and above, or 78.93%, have been collected so far. Well, some progress.
Yeah, some progress is good news. The benefit from the postponement is not all so bad with the postponement. At least a lot more people are getting their PVCs. And a lot more will still get before the final deadline. But, you know, talking about PVCs and INEC, APC members are still alleging that there is a plot by the federal government to prevent the chairman, Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Attahiru Jega, from superintending over the forthcoming general elections. This talk about firing Jega, sacking Jega, firing Jega, is just all over the place, and it's.
I think the APC should bring evidence.
Yeah, should bring evidence.
I mean, it's not enough to keep accusing the government and the PDP of trying to fire Jega. If they have evidence, they should bring it. I mean,
the president, Goodluck Jonathan, said in his media chat very clearly, "Look, I appointed the man, and there is no plan really at this moment to fire the man." So, where APC is getting all that information from, but we'll see in the next couple of days. And leading up to the election will make it very, very clear. Obiora, I think at this time we need to let our viewers know what we're discussing.
No, but not before we talk about that clash in London, because I mean they took our politics to London. And I mean, PDP and APC, and they were hearing that some people sponsored it. Actually, you woke me up this morning with that news that some people are being alleged to have organized.
Yes, the entire demonstration in Chatham House. I mean, it's online. There's even a video clip to it, you know, and it's a little bit worrisome and disturbing. I think, Obiora, we need to have a full program on rented crowds.
Rented crowds and rented demonstrations.
Yes, and rented. We need to have a program on it. And
but Mahmoud, how about this old saying that people shouldn't wash their dirty linens in public? Why are we washing ours in London?
Well, I think we temporarily took the politics from Nigeria to London the last 2 days. And that will form one of the issues we'll be discussing today. We'll be taking a look at Buhari's speech at Chatham House and the different issues that he threw up in that beautiful speech at Chatham House. And joining us later to discuss that will be a journalist who's been editor of the foreign desk at different newspapers. Mr. Charles Onunoju will be joining us later in the day to discuss that.
And the big issue tonight is human rights in Nigeria. How have we fared? And while we were talking about this, Mahmoud and I, Mahmoud said, how many Nigerians even understand what is human rights? We'll have a report before the discussion, but we have the big man when you talk about human rights in Nigeria. We have Professor Chidi Odinakalu with us in the studio, and I'm sure our cameras are catching him right now. Chidi has been around and about all over the world, and then immediately we heard that he had touched his feet on Nigerian soil. We went after him because we want to talk about human rights in Nigeria today.
Yeah, sure. All this, of course, on for tonight on the O&M Late Show.
You know, Olukolade, General Olukolade will also be speaking with us, and he apologized profusely for that hiccup. That hiccup last Tuesday. And also from far away Iowa in the United States, there's this American who's been so concerned about Boko Haram in Nigeria and then terrorist organizations around the world. He's called Dr. Fepler.
Yes.
He is going to be online with us, and he has come up with what he called the IDT, And that's what they're advising a lot of governments around the world to do. And he says that's the best way to tackle Boko Haram.
And terrorism.
And terrorism around the world. This and more when we return.
Don't go away.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Oh.
You okay?
Yeah.
Can you help get up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you, thank you.
Good price.
Oh, man. Oh. Yeah. Oh.
You okay, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Oh, thank you. Oh, man, just right over that sidewalk. Whew. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I hope you got the gist and the message in that little clip from watching the internet. People will readily help you if you dress nice and you look nice and you look important. You need help, people will readily come to you. But if you don't look too nice, if you probably look like a wino, people would not help you. And from that clip, you saw that the only person who helped the man who was not looking so well dressed was a homeless man himself. So,
some lesson there for
yes.
every one of us. But already on the phone with us is General Olukolade. General, you're welcome to the O&M Late Show.
Thank you so much, and good evening.
Yeah, so, General, what's the latest today with the campaign against the insurgents?
Well, the pace is on. Additional towns have been cleared of the terrorists. The various approaches both through the air and the ground forces are working out as planned. And we have additional list of communities in Yobe, in Adamawa, and some parts of Borno that have been cleared of the terrorists. As I speak to you, the usual cordon of search in those areas are ongoing, and we're recovering arms as well as looking out for any of the stragglers among them who might be hanging around the communities. And the push is on. We are believing that as they move in different directions in the form of disarray, they should have no escape, at least to our borders, because our partners across the border are equally at alert.
Okay, General.
Yes, a few days ago and up till yesterday, we still have flashes of IED explosions and suicide bombing as usual.
Well, General, a lot of Nigerians, excited they are, no doubt, that a lot of progress is being made in that front. But a lot of Nigerians are also asking, what changed?
Well, a few things changed, especially in the form of input into the mission in terms of arms and the required equipment, as well as the coordination among the forces involved. By virtue of the fact that they have the required equipment, it became easier for each to play out its role. If there are advances, the Air Force is quite active and go ahead to pound the target before the ground force is moving. And that has been effectively coordinated. Besides this, also the measure of maintaining a good coordination with our neighbors. You recall, like I've explained in several other places I have the privilege, that the multinational joint task force was not a new creation in the sense of the fact that before now it was created under the auspices of the Chad Business Commission. And the mandate was meant to curtail the activities of bandits and other violent criminals who engage in cross-border activities.
Okay.
Okay.
However,
Yeah. General, wanted to quickly find out from you, what is your men at the battlefront? What's the morale like now? Yesterday we saw that President Jonathan paid a surprise visit to some of those towns that have been reclaimed, complete with his military gear, swagger stick and everything. I was proud, really. But what's the morale like of the men right now at the battlefront?
The morale is quite high, and I must let you know that the visit of Mr. President has affected not just the locations he visited, but across the entire theater. The news went round, and all the members of the forces who are operating in those areas got to know that Mr. President was physically on ground. In Baga, when the Chief of Army Staff introduced the CNC, he noted the fact that this was the first time the President, Commander-in-Chief, will be physically in the theater to cheer up troops, and that in itself drew some applause from the troops on ground. And like I said, it went infectious, went everywhere, and the news went round. And also the cheers from Nigeria have been fusing into the theater, and everyone is in high spirit.
Thank you, General. Thank you, as usual. We hope we'll be talking with you again on Sunday afternoon as this campaign continues.
Thank you. We'll take advantage of the privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we are moving over to the United States, where we have Dr. David Leffler. Dr. David Leffler is the Executive Director, Center for Advanced Military Science. Dr. Leffler, you're welcome to the O&M Late Show from Nigeria.
Wait.
Hello, David.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, David, we are calling you from Nigeria. Are you with us?
No. We'll get him back.
Okay, we'll go back to Dr. David Leffler. But for now, let's welcome the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Professor Chidi Odinakalu, who is joining us right away in the studio. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Prof.
Oh, good morning. I don't know what time it is.
I think it's still good evening.
Okay.
We still have about 35 minutes before it's morning.
That's generous. Thank you very much.
Well, you heard part of our conversation with General Luke Kolade about the state of affairs with our forces that are battling Boko Haram. One of the issues that had come up battling Boko Haram, especially our relationship with the United States, one of the things they said was that our forces were not quite on the line when it came to human rights, respecting human rights and all that. From your commission, is there some meat to what the Americans are saying?
Well, the thing is, you can't have a theater of operations of active conflict without people stepping out of line. Because the decisions that you make in armed conflict are instantaneous decisions. It's either your life or my life in many cases. And it's true that we expect of regular forces under proper command, but much better behavior and comportment and professionalism than you would expect of irregulars or indeed of extremists, forces driven by extremist tendencies such as Boko Haram. But that's a way of saying, things would happen in a theater of conflict. But that's why you have a command and control structure, so that when those things happen, the command and control structure deals with them and brings people back to line. And I think it's useful also that some of this progress has been made contemporaneously with the effort by the leadership of the armed forces in Nigeria to bring back discipline to the operations in the Northeast. So you see that there's been a ratcheting up, for instance. There's been a great deal of investment in courts martial, in disciplining people who are falling out of line. And I think that's proper. So I don't think there are no perfect operations in the world, and I don't think that it's proper to feel defensive about that. People are going to be out of line. But a lot of other things have also happened off camera. There's now acknowledgement, for instance, that there is post-traumatic stress with the soldiers. And so the units have accepted to get support with post-traumatic stress, because when you've got post-traumatic stress disorder in troops, things will happen. Yeah. And so there's better care, rotation policy has been upped, discipline has been improved, and I do think with that, I've always believed this thing is not going to be changed by Americans. This is happening in our country, it's going to be altered by Nigerians. We've got the forces to do it, and now that we're investing in them, they are coming through.
All right, let's look at something that has been used for electioneering campaign. And when I say that, I mean currently, the current president says very, very proudly that, he's had a wonderful human rights record. If you see some of the jingles on there, it said, it's never been this good for Nigeria. No past leader could claim to have this level of respect for human rights. There are no political prisoners, there are no, just name it. Is that the scenario really?
There are no perfect human rights records. Every country is imperfect, every generation is imperfect, and we always have to work hard to achieve perfection, knowing that we're never going to get it. I start from the premise that the worst civilian regime is better than the best military regime, because you constitute the government by exercising the human right to choose who rules you. And so there's no comparison between a human rights, a government founded on electoral legitimacy and a government that does not have electoral legitimacy. That's the basic thing. In terms of performance, obviously we're challenged with the situation in the Northeast, and with last year was quite bad in terms of conflict-related mortalities. But I think it's also fair to say that, there are also serious challenges with corruption, for instance. I think that we've not made as much progress as we could on corruption. But there are very great positives that we have to take away from this. The legislative throughput has been quite substantial. And I think the government can take genuine credit for the Freedom of Information Act. It can take proper credit for the National Health Act.
even though there are people who say, look, it's not really practicable, Freedom of Information Act is there, you still go and make those requests. Somehow you still don't get the information you want.
But you know, it's very interesting. Even if you don't now, it's actually, you know, you see the irony that a lot of the information that is being used to criticize the government on corruption comes from Freedom of Information Act, either directly or indirectly. Directly because some of them have actually come from requests that have come from the FOIA. And indirectly because even those that have not come from FOIA requests, you cannot prosecute people for those now like you would have done before the FOIA Act, because in the past they would have used the Official Secrets Act against you. Now, these are gains I think that people have to recognize. And the other thing is, you know, before 2011, I would not have accepted to be chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. That's true. And the reason is the National Human Rights Commission Amendment Act changed the landscape to make it possible to at least aspire to have an independent National Human Rights Commission. And I can say quite honestly that on the 29th of April 2013, President Jonathan gave me his word, one-on-one, that he would not interfere with my work as the National Human Rights Commission chairperson. He's been as good as his word. Now, that for me is all I ask for. I don't ask for a perfect country, but I ask for political leadership that will give independent institutions the space to try to live up to their responsibilities. And I will say that with hand on heart.
Do you think that your commission, I mean, this last few years since you came on board, has done enough to enlighten Nigerians, to educate Nigerians on what human rights are? Because there's been this argument about do Nigerians even understand what human rights, when you talk about human rights, what you're talking about. How much have you done to educate Nigerians?
I don't think any commission can ever do enough on human rights education. I think we've made some progress. I hope those who come after us make more progress, but there will never be enough progress in many ways. That said, I think everybody does understand what human rights are. The problem is at the point of claiming those rights. What's this prayer the Pentecostals say again? May God meet you at your point of need, or something, isn't it? Really, the thing about human rights is having somebody meet you at your point of need. It's not about knowledge. You know, the mama in the village who is going to the market, who is shaken down by, say, local tax collectors or rent collectors or even a hungry police officer at the end of the month, knows that what is happening is not right. The problem, however, is at that point she needs to get to the market. If she starts having an argument with this person, she will not get to the market. She will not be able to sell her wares. So she needs to reach a deal. Okay, fine, take 10 naira. And I'll pass the 10 naira, and that just allow me to go. So it is that thing about rebalancing power relations at the point of need. That's where our people need help. Getting somebody who cares, who can help, getting somebody who is going to listen. And that, I think, is the biggest place where we've got problems. Nigerians, the biggest violation we suffer is not lack of awareness in many places, it's lack of dignity.
Okay, okay, Prof. I think we'd look at it from the perspective of Nigerians and some other people outside the studio that we have spoken to in this special report by our correspondent.
Many African countries, including Kenya, Somalia, Mali, and some places in the Sahel region, faced serious security challenges in 2014 as a direct result by radical armed groups, including Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram. Tens of thousands of civilians have lost their lives, hundreds have been abducted, and countless others continue to live in a state of fear and insecurity. But the response to many governments has been equally brutal and indiscriminate, leading to mass arbitrary arrests and detentions and extrajudicial executions. According to some social commentators, the history of human rights abuses in Nigeria is as old as Nigeria herself. They say the high level of corruption in Nigeria, especially in government, makes it absolutely impossible to respect and protect human rights. In its 2014 Human Rights Risk Atlas, Maplecroft, a leading global risk analytics, research and strategic forecasting company, said in the past 6 years, the number of countries in an extreme risk of human rights offenses has risen dramatically. Nigeria is 10th on that list, classified as extreme, the highest on 4-step ranking system. This was further buttressed and backed by the response we got from some Nigerians on the street.
I don't even think if human rights is working in Nigeria, because if you look at how the things goes, when a rich man do something, he goes scot-free. When a poor man do something, that is when the law will actually fall on that person. Like what is happening in this country now, if you are supporting the other party, the other opponent will harass you. It's not supposed to be like that. In terms of politics, everybody has right to support whoever you want to support.
In fact, -0. Because human rights are being tampered with in all ramifications.
We are not there yet. In the sense that this is a country where all things goes.
Human rights is being violated in Nigeria. They are not practicing it, most especially in religion.
In line with these claims, the Amnesty International says it has, through ongoing research since 2009, gathered evidence that raises reasonable belief that Islamist militant group Boko Haram and the Nigerian military have committed crimes under international law in the context of the conflict in northeast Nigeria. But other Nigerians disagree with this position, saying that the nation's human rights status is better than what was obtainable under military rule.
I think there's so much room for improvement. That's the truth. You know, there's a lot of room for improvement, but I think we're doing very, very well.
Human rights in Nigeria is getting better. I will give them at least 80%.
We have one of the best human rights regimes in the world with the enactment of the 2009 Fundamental Rights Enforcement Rules. And Nigeria needs to do more, especially in funding human rights education. Fund the National Human Rights Institution, that is the National Human Rights Commission. Give them a lot more money to educate the citizens of their basic rights. And they should move beyond the basic rights, the fundamental rights, and begin to talk about civil and political rights, and then social, economic, and cultural rights.
Syria, Egypt, Libya, Mali, and Guinea-Bissau have seen the worst deterioration of their human rights situation, according to the report.
Well, that was our special report, bringing the other perspectives to human rights in Nigeria. We're back in the studio, but before we throw the next question to the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, we have David Leffler on the line from Iowa, United States. David, you're welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be on it.
Yeah, David, you and your colleagues have come out with what you called invincible defense technology. And in an article you co-authored with a major general, a retired major general in India, you said that might be the solution to the Boko Haram crisis in Nigeria. Can you give us some more perspective on this new technology?
Well, yes, it's based on the level of the unified field, which is a very, very powerful force. It's 100,000 million times smaller than the atomic nucleus. It works on that profound level. And so literally what can happen is when the soldiers learn the transcendental meditation technique and its advanced practice, they practice these techniques twice a day in a group, and literally they can influence the surroundings around them, and enemies become friends. The militaries are actually doing this now. It's already been done in Africa, and it's being done now in places like Latin America. And so it gives an advantage to a military that doesn't have a lot of funds or a lot of equipment, but has a lot of manpower, so they can use that manpower to the utmost degree to actually prevent enemies from arising in the first place. So this has been already done. It's backed by numerous scientific experiments.
Okay, David, you in that paper that you co-authored with the Major General, you did say that terrorism and things that are associated with terrorism don't just happen, that there's an environment that makes that possible. How do you prevent this environment looking at this new technology, invincible defensive technology?
Well, basically, individuals influence their surroundings through every thought, word, and action. These influences are either life-supporting or life-damaging. So when people are happy, creative, and at peace with themselves, their surroundings reflect their state of well-being, and peace is a result. However, when people are unhappy, restless, and tense, the atmosphere becomes saturated with these life-damaging influences, and peace is disrupted. So literally what happens is the research shows when people practice the transcendental meditation technique, and particularly this advanced meditation technique that your military would learn, that the brain waves become very, very coherent and much more powerful, and this actually creates a field effect. And through this field effect, it's actually possible to reduce problems like terrorism, crime, and war, sickness and accidents, all these instances where there's turbulence in society. These things can be dissipated. And so literally the military is a prevention, it's called a prevention wing of the military because it's preventing these things from happening. Or if they're happening, to end them as quickly as possible.
Okay, David, thank you for your insight. I'm sure from time to time we'll be inviting you to speak with us on this new technology.
Thank you very much. And people can go to the website strongmilitary.org to find more information. There's numerous articles that have been published worldwide. You can review the scientific research there and see military people who actually recommend this approach and have used this approach. For instance, one of the people on our staff is Lieutenant General Villamil, the former Vice Minister of Ecuador, who used this technology in his country very successfully.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to Prof.
Strongmilitary.org.
Yes. Now, when a crime is committed, there are two sides to it. In a situation like this one, we want to talk about respecting human rights. Even when somebody attempts to take your rights away, you know, but you just, from the example you gave, you just don't want to go into the process of trying to claim that right. So you just settle whichever way and then you move on. You know, how do we make people understand that you have to claim that right?
You have to ask for it.
You've got to ask. You've got to make demands. And I really think that's the first thing. But I think it's easy to ask poor people to make demands, but it's also necessary for us to ask those in leadership to provide leadership and to support credible institutions. And that's why I personally am a strong advocate for a police force that works, law enforcement that works, because that's the first line of defense for poor people. And when those work and you've got a leadership that listens and an administration that works, it's much easier to tell people make claims. But if those institutions don't work, law enforcement, leadership, and administration, it's a lot more difficult.
Okay, as Martin Luther said to his disciples, he said, on top of the mountain, are you seeing any lights at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I'm an optimist about this country, and I'd like to invite everybody to be optimistic about this country, in spite of our present challenges. When you look at the young people of the country, and when you look at the passion that people still have for Nigeria, in spite of the differences we've got, and when you look at our diversity, there are tremendous opportunities. And I do think we are going to overcome our current challenges, and we're going to forge ahead as a much more united, much more formidable country.
That respects human rights.
That respects rights and dignity.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm sure the next time you come here, you'll be talking to us about violence in elections and how the Human Rights Commission is.
Okay, Prof. We'd like to present this to you.
Wow, that's generous.
For your coffee.
Thank you very much. I'll enjoy myself with this.
Okay,
and terrific set.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
I hope you'll be here again.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
All right, we're still on the O&M Late Show. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the speech by...
The big speech.
Yes, the big speech. A lot of people have said it was a nice one by the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress, APC, retired General Muhammadu Buhari. And joining us now, a journalist, Mr. Charles Ononoju, to take a look and look at the different aspects of the Buhari speech at Chatham House in London.
You're welcome.
Charles. Sit.
Well, Charles, we'll take just 1 minute and take a little part of that speech at Chatham House. Let's have that speech by Buhari at Chatham House.
The 2015 general election in Nigeria is generating a lot of interest within and outside the country. This is understandable. Nigeria, Africa's most populous country and largest economy, is at a defining moment, a moment that has great implications beyond the democratic project and beyond the borders of my dear country. So let me say upfront that the global interest in Nigeria's landmark election is not misplaced at all, and indeed should be commended, for this is an election that has serious import for the world. I urge the international community to continue to focus on Nigeria at this very critical moment. Given increasing global linkages, it is in our collective interest that the postponed elections should hold on the rescheduled dates, that they should be free and fair, that their outcomes should be respected by all parties, and that any form of extension under whatever guise is unconstitutional and will not be tolerated.
Well,
General Muhammadu Buhari at Chatham House in the United Kingdom. So, Charles, you were going to fire the first.
No, I was just going to say that if you want to watch the full speech of Muhammadu Buhari in Chatham House, go to our website, www.hblnews.com.
Charles, for you, how was the speech? How did you rate it, first and foremost?
Yeah, the speech, in my view, is not just about rating, but it underscores the fundamental disconnect in our socio-economic and political life. He underscored the contradiction, the lack of contextualization of the so-called economic reforms, which has not yielded. It has produced the monster that we know of South America, what we call growth without development. You have big statistics. The tendency by a certain international economic bureaucracy to present human misery in statistics. And that is what we've seen replicated here. And I think General Buhari touched on that fundamental point when he spoke about two economies.
In Nigeria.
Yes.
One inhabited in a tiny island of the extremely rich. And the pain about this extremely rich is that simply parasitic, produce nothing, has even no capacity to reproduce what they consume. Completely bankrupt, parasitic, and unable. Then the question is, now you have this ocean of misery of ordinary people who it is generally believed that maybe when it is so much at the top, it could trickle down. And you will agree with me, we waited so much for this trickle-down effect. And truly, let me tell you, fundamentally, this thing is not strange. In South America in the 70s and 80s, we see this neoliberal economic reform. The Milton Friedman's boys, the so-called Chicago boys in Chile, who also instigated this kind of earth-scorching economic reforms that left out a whole number of people, complete exclusion. And the backlash was the resurgence of guerrilla warfare, left-wing guerrilla warfare, all over South America, from Argentina to Peru, the shining part in Peru, from Argentina to Brazil. Of course, the current Brazilian president, Mrs. Rousseff, was a Marxist guerrilla. She also fought in the forest, up to Lula, So the backlash of neoliberal economic reforms without contextualization in the actual social environment resulted in those left-wing insurgencies. In our own case, it produced a monster, Boko Haram, not even a left-wing guerrilla with some platform, agenda of social regeneration. We have a complete Philistine group that has no idea, they want to take us back to the 15th, 16th century. That is the tragedy of Africa. We produce Lord Resistance Army in Uganda, Boko Haram in Nigeria, and such kind of primitive backward elements.
Now, the Buhari said there in his paper that after the rebasing in April last year of Nigerian economy, it became the biggest in Africa, overtaking that of South Africa. I know gave a few other indices to show that there was some kind of growth, but also ended up saying that growth was largely on paper. Now, in trying to profile solutions, he did say that if he was elected, he will try to turn the situation around. From what you saw in the paper, did Buhari himself display any proper knowledge of how to turn this economy, which for him, he described as a failed economy?
Okay, let me tell you something. You see, General Buhari is one, everybody knows what has stood him in this tough political mean. It's been his integrity. And I believe that his integrity can drive the process of an economic inclusion, a policy that is inclusive, that will carry a lot of Nigerians along. He does not have to micromanage Nigeria. He does not have to be a professor of economics. I tell you, one man who turned China around from a basket case, Deng Xiaoping, was also 74 years old when he took over in China. He's not an economist. He didn't even finish secondary school. He joined the party at the age of 17, and he has enormous credibility. But he has knack to identify people. He created opportunity. He found out people who could. He defined the vision and then find out the policy wonks, find out the foot soldiers. So I don't think General Buhari is going to come to micromanaging the economy, but with his bold vision of a regenerated Nigeria, an inclusive social, an inclusive Nigeria, in which, the truth of the matter is people have capacity. How do we unleash their capacity? How do we get people involved in the process? You see, here, people felt it's a favor to give somebody employment, but when you employ people, they contribute to the commonwealth, they span the national cake. So it's not a favor. You're asking somebody to come and contribute his quota to enlarging the national will, to enlarging the national cake. So he is actually giving more than he is taking, so it's not actually a favor. So for him to identify the poverty, employment, and distribution of wealth, this is the challenge of economic management. In fact, the greatest work, the greatest economists in the world now.
For me, the summary of Buhari's entire speech was what he called waste and corruption. And then
the two problems of Nigeria
that has contributed to the rest, to the other problems that are plaguing the country. Did he, and I'm going back to what Mamode had asked, did he, in that speech, show us the way out of that problem?
He was very clear. He said, I'm going to block the leakages. He has said, instead of Federal Executive Council meeting, holding to discuss contract, we have national procurement agents. They just do these things. What Buhari said, he's not going to write a new rule. There are already existing rules. The rules that are existing is enough to keep us on the straight line. The simple thing is that these rules are always obeyed in the breach. I am going to make sure that the National Procurement Agency functions. National Executive Council will no longer be discussing contract, Federal Executive contract. Ministers will not be pushing their fronts to get contract. They will discuss policy. And we will have these agencies work. You will eliminate waste. Of course, corruption, everybody knows. It's not a big deal. Everybody knows that in this regime, we've not had it before. It had never been like this before. It's been a monster. And the worst is these people try to whitewash corruption, to make it look decent, to make it look appealing. Shamelessly, the market corruption as a virtue before our very eyes.
Let me take you to another side of that speech. We saw a Buhari who was trying to sell his credentials when he says, look, I was former head of state, and every military regime is a dictatorship, but I'm a converted Democrat. I have had to stand the election for four times because of my belief in democracy. Is that a true baptism? Is it a true, is it rejuvenation now, or is it a new Buhari? Is what he's trying to sell? Is it a good package really that he's selling?
Yeah, frankly speaking, in a real democracy, or the kind of democratic consolidation we are aspiring, being a Democrat, doing the right thing, following this, is not even a matter of your willpower. You have constraints. You have enormous institutional constraints that makes it possible for you to become a dictator. They are there, the objective, they are there. So it's not even a matter of wishing to be. He just has to be. He is going to operate within the context of democratic constraints, and norms. Within the context of obvious institutional constraints, and he cannot be a dictator even if he wants to. So in spite of his new commitment, personal commitment to be a Democrat, the institutional framework of our process does not even allow him to become a dictator, even if he wants.
Even with our weak systems, weak
we are out of
institutions.
As weak as they are, as weak as they are, we've seen it. We've seen Obasanjo was constrained. He wanted constitutional change to become third term. He fought for it in spite of his denials.
He lost.
But he lost.
So
you can see these constraints are there.
I think we're very unfortunately, Charles, of course, so interesting and exciting to always talk to. We'll have to bring you back, Charles. We're out of time now.
Thank you so much.
But we'll just a little gift from us, a mug. But you won't get it this next time you are here.
Don't worry. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's our package for tonight. Don't forget that on Sunday at 2 p.m., there's another package on your O&M Sunday show. Don't also forget that you can watch this show and our so many other shows on www.hblnews.com. From Abuja, Nigeria, I am Obiora Ilo.
And I am Mahmoud Akua. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.